Today in the Daily Dose, the Alaska Purchase. After its loss to Great Britain during the Crimean War of 1853 to 1856, Russian officials feared losing their remote and weakly defended Alaska territory to further British aggression, at the same time fearing their loss of the territory to the same brand of American expansionism that saw the loss of Texas from Mexico. In response, Russia's minister to the U.S., Edward de Stokel, commenced negotiations with pro-expansionist Secretary of State William H. Seward, and while the American public believed Alaska to be a frozen swatch of wasteland, when the U.S. formally took possession of Alaska on October 18, 1867, critics were quick to call it Seward's Folly, or Andrew Johnson's Polar Bear Garden, due to the latter's broad unpopularity amongst American voters. The purchase added 586,412 square miles to the United States, nearly twice the size of Texas, all at a cost of $7.2 million, or less than 2 cents an acre. Public opinion would shift dramatically when gold was discovered in 1899, sparking a gold rush that exposed fortune seekers to temperatures as low as minus 50 degrees Fahrenheit. The territory achieved statehood on January 3, 1959, which today accounts for more than 25% of American oil extraction and over 50% of all seafood consumed in the United States. While Alaska comprises the largest state by landmass, it sports a hardy population of only 732,000 people, with more than half that number living in the Anchorage metro area alone. Each year, Alaskans celebrate the Alaska Purchase with 2 official state holidays. Seward's Day, observed on the last Monday of March, which marks the signing of the land agreement between the U.S. and Russia, while October 18th celebrates the anniversary of the formal land transfer, making the Alaska Purchase yet another massive acquisition in a nation's full embrace of manifest destiny. The Battle of the Alamo. Originally built as a Catholic mission known as San Antonio de Valero, after the Spanish secularized El Alamo as Spanish soldiers renamed the fort in the early 1800s. During the opening stages of the Texas War of Independence from Mexico, by December 1835, volunteer Texan soldiers under the command of George Collinsworth and Benjamin Milham overwhelmed a garrison of Mexican soldiers stationed at the Alamo. When Colonel Jim Bowie and Lieutenant Colonel William B. Travis took command of the Alamo in mid-February 1836, despite protests by newly appointed Commander-in-Chief Sam Houston that forces at the Alamo lacked sufficient numbers to defend against a Mexican attack, more than 200 Texan volunteers, including legendary frontiersman and former Congressman Davy Crockett, vowed to defend the Alamo to the last. Their vow would come true during the 13-day Battle of the Alamo, when on February 23, 1836, a Mexican force made up of 1,800 to 6,000 men, led by General Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna, laid siege to the fort, suffering egregious losses, some 600 to 1,600 killed in action, before breaching the outer courtyard wall. Ordering his men to take no prisoners, only a handful of Texans would be spared in the slaughter that followed, save for a handful of Texans like Susanna Dickinson and her infant daughter, who were sent to Houston's camp at Gonzales as a warning against continued rebellion to Mexican rule. The Battle of the Alamo soon became a symbol of resistance and a rallying cry in the Texans' struggle for independence, while the phrase "Remember the Alamo" became a second battle cry as 800 Texan volunteers under Houston's command defeated Santa Anna's army on April 21, 1836. Houston's victory ensured independence for Texas, while the battle cry "Remember the Alamo" would once again rise in the American vernacular during the Mexican-American War of 1846 to 1848, making the Battle of the Alamo one of the bloodiest events during America's deep embrace of manifest destiny. California Genocide. Before gold was discovered in 1848 Sutter's Mill, California, Native Californians had lived in relative peace for thousands of years, speaking up to 80 languages over a population base of some 150,000 people. That all changed during the steady arrival of white fortune seekers from back east, and when California became a state in 1850, the state's first governor, Peter Hardeman Burnett, like many white settlers, saw indigenous Californians as lazy, savage, and dangerous, informing his legislative brethren during the second State of the State address that a war of extermination will continue to be waged between the races until the Indian race becomes extinct, and that while we cannot anticipate this result but with painful regret, the inevitable destiny of the race is beyond the power or wisdom of man to avert. Living up to his racist sentiments, Burnett gave a green light to the funding of local militias against California natives, enshrining into law the right for white citizens to arrest, enslave, or murder Native Californians. In a little-known act of ethnic cleansing, state militias raided tribal encampments, shooting and oftentimes scalping Native Americans, at the same time setting up bounty payments for white settlers that brought about the murder of 6,400 to 16,000 Native Californians between 1846 to 1873, while the U.S. Army took the lives of an additional 1,600 Native Californians. In many cases, the killing sprees wiped out entire tribal outposts, including the 1850 massacre of some 400 Pomo people, slaughtered by U.S. cavalrymen and local volunteers at Clear Lake, where a 6-year-old girl named Nika survived the ordeal by hiding in the lake and breathing through a reed. While many Native Californians died from the introduction of foreign diseases or enslavement, by the end of the slaughter in 1873, only 30,000 indigenous people remained, costing state coffers an estimated $1.7 million, a staggering sum at the time, to eradicate Native Americans from California soil. Still others were forced onto reservations, while Native children were forced to attend Indian assimilation schools. While California formally apologized for the genocide of Native Californians in 2019, the state also stands guilty of forced sterilizations of Mexicans during the state's eugenics movement of 1907 to 1964, as well as the discrimination and internment of some 120,000 Japanese Americans during the Second World War, making the genocide of 1846 to 1873 the first of many brutal injustices in California history. Filibusters in Central America. Under the banner of manifest destiny and a nascent sense of white supremacy, between the Mexican-American and Civil Wars, ambitious Americans attempted repeated land grabs in Central and South America, earning the name of filibusters or filibustero in the Spanish. Among the most successful or unsuccessful, dependent upon his ultimate fate, was lawyer and newspaperman William Walker, who moved from New Orleans to Northern California, where he recruited a small band of largely failed gold miners for a planned takeover of Baja, Mexico. Sailing out of San Francisco Bay with a ragtag crew of 45 men, Walker arrived in Cabo San Lucas at the end of October 1853, capturing La Paz by early November. His ranks swelled to over 300 enthusiastic mercenaries, until his lack of leadership and his beleaguered supply chain forced his retreat toward San Diego, where he surrendered to a detachment from the U.S. Army. acquitted by a San Francisco jury in just 8 minutes' time, a testament to the strength of public opinion in Walker's favor. A year later, Walker took advantage of a civil war in Nicaragua, capturing the city of Granada before declaring himself president of the country in October of 1855. After Walker revoked shipping magnate Cornelius Vanderbilt's right to transit Nicaragua, Vanderbilt raised a private army that was soon joined by anxious forces from Costa Rica, Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador, forcing Walker from power in less than 10 months' time, only to receive a hero's welcome upon his return to the States. In 1860, Walker launched yet another filibustering or freebooting campaign, as it was commonly known, this time in Honduras, quickly drawing the ire of the British government, which still had strategically important colonies in Central America. The Royal British Navy captured Walker upon his arrival in Trujillo, turning him over to Honduran authorities, who executed him by firing squad in September of that same year, at just 36 years of age. 8 months later, upon the outbreak of the American Civil War, filibustering faded into obscurity, while the uniquely American belief in manifest destiny fizzled out by 1867, making filibustering in Central America one of the oddest overreaches in American history. Jesse James and the Wild West. In the mid to late 1800s, Wild West outlaws soon became romanticized when their stories hit the pages of early American tabloids and dime store novels, which portrayed the men as underdogs who fit the American frontier ideals of gutsy individualism and pioneering rebel spirit. Born in Clay County, Missouri in 1847, an area known as Little Dixie in the western part of the state, Jesse James grew up in a slave-owning family who supported the Confederate cause. And when Jesse was a teenager in 1864, he and his brother Frank became members of a guerrilla outfit known as Bushwhackers, who murdered dozens of Union soldiers, leading some historians to speculate that his post-war anger over the South's defeat led to his violent career robbing trains, stagecoaches, and banks. By his own admission, Jesse saw himself as a modern-day Robin Hood who took from the rich and gave to the poor, although no evidence exists that he ever gave money to anyone outside his immediate family. According to the State Historical Society of Missouri, the James Younger gang worked a broad swatch of territory, from Iowa to Texas, and even as far east as West Virginia. From 1860 to 1882, the James Younger gang committed more than 20 bank and train robberies, pocketing an estimated $200,000, or approximately $4 million in today's inflated currency. When newspapers began reporting on the renegade band of outlaws, Jesse's thirst for public attention became insatiable, while his ever-widening legend was fueled by the help of newspaper editor John Newman Edwards, who was responsible for perpetuating Jesse's Robin Hood comparisons thanks to Jesse's own words. "We are not thieves, we are bold robbers," Jesse wrote in a letter to Edwards that was later published. "I am proud of the name, for Alexander the Great was a bold robber, and Julius Caesar and Napoleon Bonaparte." His downfall began in earnest in 1881, when Missouri Governor Thomas Crittenden offered a $10,000 reward, roughly $200,000 in today's money, for the capture of Jesse and Frank James. On April 3, 1882, Jesse was shot and killed by Robert Ford, who was a new recruit to the James Younger gang. Having been promised amnesty for their prior crimes if they successfully brought in Jesse James, Robert and his brother Charles surrendered themselves to legal authorities, but were dismayed when they were charged with first-degree murder. In the course of a single day, the Ford brothers were indicted and sentenced to death by hanging, only to be granted a full pardon 2 hours later by Governor Crittenden himself. John Deere. Born in 1804 Rutland, Vermont, John Deere was raised by his mother after his father was lost at sea when Deere was just 4 years old. Apprenticed as a blacksmith at age 17, he quickly found a claim for his workmanship due to his ingenuity in making plows. Following a collapse in the New England economy in 1836, Deere moved his blacksmithing business west to Grand Detour, Illinois, where he quickly came to realize that plows made for East Coast soils performed badly in the sticky soils found on Midwestern prairies, obliging frustrated farmers to stop every few feet to scrape clods of earth from the cast iron surfaces of their plows. Convinced he could produce a self-scouring plow to fit the needs of Midwestern prairie farmers, Deere produced his first plow using steel from a broken saw blade, prompting hundreds to converge on Lewis Crandall's Grand Detour farm to witness the young blacksmith's product, which proved to be a dazzling success. Moving 70 miles southwest to Moline, Illinois in 1848, Deere and his partner Leonard Andrus set up their new business on the east bank of the Mississippi River, drawing water from the river to run their factory, employing riverboats to deliver raw materials for their production line, while moving finished plows and other farm equipment to markets throughout the Midwest and beyond. Soon producing 1,000 plows a year, 1,600 by 1850, Deere abandoned his source of raw steel from England when he signed contracts with Pittsburgh steel manufacturers to develop comparable steel plates, thereby eliminating supply chain interruptions due to overseas import delays. Incorporating under the name of Deere & Company in 1868, John Deere would go on to become a pillar of his community, serving as Moline's second mayor beginning in 1873. After his death in 1886, his surviving company went on to produce high-quality equipment that carries forth to this day. The company's first tractor, the Waterloo Boy, made its first appearance on farms in 1918, while the company expanded its product lines over the coming years to include lawn tractors, heavy construction equipment, sports turf grooming equipment, logging machines, as well as separately sold engines and drivetrains. Today, thanks to the company's strict adherence to John Deere's insistence on producing quality equipment, Deere & Company enjoys a market capitalization of over $116 billion, making the life and work of John Deere an important entrepreneur in 19th century America. Today in the Daily Dose, Kit Carson, a trailblazer to the American West. Born in December of 1809, Kit Carson left his Missouri home at the tender age of 16, becoming a mountain man and fur trapper in the untamed American West. In the 1830s, he accompanied Ewing Young on an expedition into Mexican California, before heading into the Rocky Mountains on repeated fur trapping expeditions, where he lived among and married into the Arapaho and Cheyenne tribes. In the 1840s, Carson achieved national fame when he was hired as a guide by John Fremont, who mapped the Oregon Trail to assist and encourage pioneers on their journey west. Under Fremont's command, Carson participated in the conquest of California from Mexico at the beginning of the Mexican-American War, again rising to national acclaim when he walked 15 miles barefoot to fetch reinforcements from San Diego after the disastrous Battle of San Pasqual. During the 1850s, Carson was appointed as an Indian agent to the Ute and Jacqueria Apaches, and when the Civil War broke out, he helped eliminate a Confederate threat in New Mexico. Carson also led forces during the Indian Wars, suppressing the Navajo, Mescalero Apache, Kiowa, and Comanche tribes by destroying their food sources. Later, he was breveted a brigadier general and took command of Fort Garland, Colorado, until declining health forced him to retire from military life. After his death in 1868 from an aortic aneurysm, during the late 19th century, Kit Carson became a legendary symbol of America's frontier experience after he was canonized in countless dime store novels and Hollywood movies. In more recent years, Carson has also become a symbol of the American nation's gross mistreatment of its indigenous peoples. And there you have it, Kit Carson and the American frontier, today on the Daily Dose. If you like learning something new every day, subscribe to the Daily Dose on YouTube or sign up for emails at dailydosenow.com.